This episode is sponsored by Cribble.
You know what sucks? So many things, but logs. They're wordy, obnoxiously different in format, and to top it all off, they're freaking expensive to move around and store. Oh, and they're only really going to be used as evidence to yell at you for something bad happening. Cribble can't help you with the last one, but their newly launched Cribble Edge efficiently gathers and processes observability data, by which I mean not just logs, where it's created in any format and delivers it to where you want to go. Plus, the best kind of problem is someone else's problem, so their likewise new Cribble Cloud gives you a deployment option that they host and run for you. You want to focus on keeping your application up, not your observability solution. To learn more, smash the link and the like and subscribe buttons in order to make your logging problem someone else's. In this case, Cribble's. There are thousands of posts out there from the past 15 years talking about what to do to ensure that you don't run afoul of the AWS free tier limits and headlong into the land of giant billing surprise. But if you have ventured into that ominous territory, made a mistake, and then received a disturbingly high bill that looks about as much money as it takes to buy Guam, the prophylactic guidance all screams to a halt. The articles that I've seen don't offer meaningful advice past contact AWS support and be patient as you wait to see whether you're going to owe AWS more than the remaining balance of your mortgage. This video is intended to remedy that lack of useful, actionable steps for scrubbing those 5- and 6-figure charges from your bill. Breathe. It's going to be okay. Now then, the first thing you should do is, in fact, to open a support case with AWS immediately. And again, remember to breathe. Now, what should your support case say? I'd suggest being honest. That said, here are some things to bear in mind. First, it's not going to be treated as the screaming emergency that you almost certainly believe it to be. It's true, you're going to need to be prepared to wait a bit. AWS support is overloaded at the best of times, which these are not, and there are a lot of issues that people bring them, like production is down, that are going to be a lot more pressing than someone with a billing issue. Rest assured, although it feels like your world is collapsing at the time, an AWS billing issue is in fact something that can be handled competently during business hours. Further, when I say you'll wait a bit, you should probably be aware that I mean for the better part of 5 business days for an initial response, and then a few more days for every round of back and forth. You don't need a paid support plan to handle billing issues, but the response time you get is about what you'd expect for not paying for support. That is a bit of a mixed bag. It might help you to remember that whatever it might feel like at the moment, AWS is really not in the business of screwing people over. There's a better than good chance that your request will be granted and your debt will be discharged. I shouldn't have to include this section, which boils down to don't be a jerk, but based upon some field experience reports, I very much do. Remember, first off, that you're asking for a favor. The person that you're talking to is reportedly a human being. They are, and they have a very hard job. They're empowered to advocate on your behalf, but they're also empowered to follow the precise letter of the policy set down before them. How do you think that insulting them is going to help them decide to help you out? Secondly, your overall tone when opening your support case should be aimed at differentiating yourself from someone who spun up a whole bunch of resources to intentionally mine cryptocurrency and then followed up with a sob story to AWS to get away with doing this scot-free. Your job is not to present as a scammer. And third, it should be clear that threatening AWS is a complete non-starter here. First, they're bigger than you are, and they can act accordingly. Two notable threats that people love to toss around are filing a chargeback and suing AWS. Let me explain why both of those are counterproductive. I'm filing a chargeback! For those unaccustomed to the way that credit cards work in the United States, Filing a chargeback with your credit card company means that you are disputing the charge. Maybe you'll win, maybe you'll get overruled. Either way, it just means that AWS is going to send a collections agency after you if you don't clean up the misunderstanding. Remember, you're trying to present as sympathetic. Causing trouble with their credit card processor cuts directly against that. I might feel differently about this if the tactic worked, but it absolutely doesn't. I'm gonna sue you because you're all dicks! Whenever you're involved in a dispute with a company, threatening legal action is probably the dumbest possible thing you can do until you've exhausted all of your other resources. As soon as you start down that path, support reps at every company are almost certainly required by policy to stop responding to you and instead refer your case to the legal department. Legal's responses are measured in weeks and are designed entirely to shield the company from liability. Plus, it's just not credible as a threat. People who are going to sue don't chest thump about it. They call their attorney, who says, say nothing to them that doesn't go through me first, and then the opposing party that they're suing finds out when the attorney sends them either a nastygram or the lawsuit itself. While you're waiting, see whether you can figure out what went wrong so you don't find yourself digging the hole deeper. It is invariably going to be something that strongly resembles the compromise of credentials on your end, and that's going to be harder to find than you might expect because AWS is big. It's theoretically possible that you did something yourself, but that bill usually totals a few $100s if you've misconfigured something, or a couple of grand at the outside unless you've just gone completely wild and spun up a managed NAT gateway or three. I don't suggest panic Googling about this, but when you do inevitably panic Google about this, you might notice that historical posts on Reddit, Hacker News, or Twitter all show bill problems with dollar figures that are way smaller than the one that you're probably staring at. There's a reason. There are now a lot more AWS regions, each with their own assortment of services and attendant quotas. There are ever more ways to exploit AWS to mine cryptocurrency, which is what most of this is about, because that's a great ecosystem. And remember, with so many ways to run containers on AWS, every one of those containers could theoretically be put to work mining cryptocurrency. Web3 is awesome. In most cases, AWS is going to make a lot of the pain go away. I obviously can't promise results, but this is the template that I've seen get success in many previous scenarios. This last part might be considered controversial by folks at AWS, but I don't care. Because personally, I would make sure that dealing with something like this was the last time that I let AWS give me a problem like this. So therefore, if I were you, I'd wait until the charges were reversed and the issue was settled. I would remain polite, and I would proceed to close my AWS account entirely and not use the platform again for a while, if ever. My reasoning's pretty straightforward on this, because it's entirely possible that you missed something that an attacker could use to regain access. And also, until AWS fixes its damn free tier, I've got to urge people to work in more safely sandboxed environments by other providers that don't charge customers 5 or occasionally 6 figures as a surprise when something goes wrong. The giant billing surprise is a stressful thing. Why would anyone risk going through it more than once?